a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Those are the words of the Second Amendment to the Bill of Rights of the United States Constitution, the very document that governs how the government works. Let's talk about a couple aspects of that, okay? For the anti-gunners out there, I'm not going to use any political labels. For the anti-gunners out there, they like to use the militia argument. That the Founding Fathers put that in there so that people would have a means to be able to muster a militia in the event of an emergency of some sort or for national defense. It's kind of true. Kind of. The purpose, it's a part of it. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to discredit that. It is a part of it. Otherwise, they would not have put it in there. However, those same people that want to go after guns, and not necessarily just guns, just the actual liberty, the individual freedom to keep and bear arms and restrict it, they always neglect to acknowledge the second part that the Founding Fathers had put in there, which is the right of the people part of it. The Founding Fathers had just won independence from a tyrannical government, or a government they perceived and they saw as tyrannical. And they wanted to make sure that there was a means that the citizenry could overthrow a tyrannical government if a government came along or happened to evolve where the citizens felt it was tyrannical and there were no other options. They didn't trust government. The Founding Fathers didn't even trust their government that they put in place. They didn't trust big government, small government, any government. They wanted some kind of a mechanism in there to be able to regulate it. They understood the general concept of freedom. A truly free people are an armed people, plain and simple. The Founding Fathers understood the principle that the government should fear the people, not the other way around. Now, if you take the Second Amendment out of the picture, then all you have is words on paper. You can protest all you want to, but if the government were to turn tyrannical, and let's say you do hold a peaceful protest, well, a tyrannical government isn't going to honor a peaceful protest. Look at Syria right now. That started out as peaceful protests. Look what it turned into. The government didn't honor it. They didn't honor that sacred right. The Second Amendment was put in place by the Founding Fathers to prevent something like that. Now, I know that's an extreme. I'm aware of that. I understand that. And I hope with everything in my being that it never comes to that. I really and honestly do. I do not want to have to pick up my guns and fight against the government. I still have faith to a very finite point, probably the exact same finite point that the Founding Fathers who set up our federal system have in government. Government derives its power from the consent of the governed. In order to maintain that consent of the governed, the government has to respect the citizenry. If they don't have a means to properly defend themselves from a domestic threat, then all you have are words on paper that can be just Easy as that. No real resistance, nothing. Protesters versus bullets. And again, I hope, with everything in me, every fiber of my being, every cell in my body, that it never, ever, 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 ever comes to that. And I have faith that it never will, but just in case. Most people never get in car accidents, but they still get car insurance, just in case. I touched on the defense from domestic threats. Let's talk about defense from, foreign threats. I'm going to give you 2 examples. Both of them are from the World War II era. Now, I know there are people watching this that are going to go, oh, well, that was 70 years ago. All right. Yes, it was 70 years ago. But you know what? If we ever got in a global conflict again, the same rules would apply. The first one is, at the risk of bashing one of our greatest allies, Great Britain. In 1926, they instituted sweeping gun bans, sweeping gun control measures that severely restricted the right of the people to keep and bear arms because they didn't have a Second Amendment afforded to them in their Constitution. So it was easy for their government to pass laws that effectively disarmed them. Not completely and totally, but for the most part made it so difficult that the average person would not want to attempt to keep up with the paperwork, to have the proper licensing to own a firearm. And they got the end result, the end desired result. Nobody had guns. When nobody owns guns, a country's gun manufacturers typically go out of business. So it's a gun grabber's dream. 1926 was a gun grabber's dream in Britain. Now, in World War II, Britain enters World War II. Erwin Rommel effectively routed the British out of northern Africa. They were in a complete and total disarray. Horribly, horribly, horribly bad defeat. Dropping whatever they had in their hands, or picking up whatever they could grab within reach. Beaten feet back to as far away from the front as they could get. Now, in the process of this mad rush to get away, a lot of the British troops left behind uniforms, food, water, tanks, artillery, small arms, rifles, pistols, shotguns, planes. I'm sure if it wasn't the desert, I'm sure they found a way to leave a couple of boats on the battlefield for the Germans. So you had pretty much a voluntary disarmament of a vast majority of the British military. Now, at the time, the only mass-producing, if you honestly want to call them mass-producing firearms companies still open, were companies like Holland and Holland, which, for those of you that are not very knowledgeable on guns, no offense, Holland and Holland makes double-barreled hunting rifles and shotguns, as well as bolt-action rifles intended for hunting, mostly big game in Africa. Kind of ironic, actually, but they're not very effective military arms, obviously. There were no gun manufacturers that were able to produce at the rate that was necessary to arm not only the British military, desperately in need of weaponry, but also the British citizenry that had organized into a home guard. So, what did they do? They had to get guns from somewhere. I mean, good God, they were fighting a war. How do you win a war without guns, without weapons, without armaments? Well, they went across the pond for help from the Americans, who have a Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Millions of Americans voluntarily parted with some of their most prized possessions, some of their favorite rifles, shotguns, handguns, with no real expectation of ever getting them back, knowing that the vast majority of them probably were never going to see those guns again. And even in the face of this epic lesson in how gun control is a horrible idea on so many different fronts, as soon as the war was over and the war was won and the threat to Great Britain was over, they sent all the guns back or destroyed the ones that they couldn't track down the owners for. There is an old saying that says, those who do not honor and remember their history are damned to repeat it. Just saying. Example number 2 involves us, the Americans, and the Japanese. After Pearl Harbor, Emperor Hirohito was hell-bent on a full-on invasion of America's shores. Why? Because he felt that our military was weak, soft, and ill-prepared, which wasn't far off. It was actually pretty accurate. At the time, we had a very weak military. We were very unprepared for warfare, and we were a very soft target, militarily speaking. Admiral Yamamoto, the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Japanese Armed Forces, did a little digging, and he outright refused to put the lives of the Imperial Japanese service members in direct danger that magnitude, because he feared that there would be a gun behind every blade of grass. Now obviously that's an over-exaggeration, but it kept America, the home front, safe. It kept the United States of America's sovereign soil from getting attacked directly in a massive invasion, because we have guns, because we have the right to keep and bear arms, because our forefathers gave us that right. They didn't stand down because they were afraid of our military. At the time, our military was a joke. It's nothing like it is today. All right? We were not a superpower by any means. They didn't do it because they didn't back down from that claim because they were afraid of our government. If they're not afraid of our military, what they got to fear from our government, given who gives the military the marching orders? No, they backed down from trying to invade America because honest, responsible, everyday, average Americans like you and me have the individual liberty to keep and bear arms, which allows us to not only defend ourselves from domestic threats of all sorts, but also from foreign threats of all sorts. In Los Angeles in the, I want to say earlier mid-90s, during the Watts riots, unarmed storekeepers, their stores were destroyed, burned, looted, torn to the ground. Armed shopkeepers, they were able to defend their property and their families, keep their wives from getting raped, keep their goods from getting stolen, and kept their buildings from getting burned to the ground, because they have the right to keep and bear arms. In Hurricane Katrina, the first and only real gun confiscation in this country's history happened. You didn't see it on the news, but I promise you, it happened. The most vulnerable time when people needed their guns the most. And Mayor Ray Nagin stepped in and said, no, you can't have them. It is too dangerous for you to have your guns. They went door to door. The New Orleans Police Department collecting guns. There's a great video on YouTube, actually, of a 250, 300-pound, huge, big, stocky, burly police officer tackling an elderly woman in her 90s. Might be 80s or 70s, but you get the point. Because she reached into a drawer and produced a handgun. Didn't point it at the police officers. Did not point it at the police officers. Didn't brandish it. Just reached in a drawer and said, "Oh, are you talking about this?" Boom. Taken to the ground. Instantly. Handcuffed. No questions asked. Hauled out. Like she had just killed 16 people right there in front of them. And then, of course, there's a right to self-defense. You know, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Well, you can't have liberty without life. You definitely can't have the pursuit of happiness without life. A firearm is the greatest equalizer. There's another old proverb that says that God made all men different. Which, if you believe in God, yes, that's true. He did make us all different. All women different too. And men, women from different. And men, women, and men different from women. So, but Sam Colt made them all equal. Which is also true. With a firearm, a 110-pound female has the ability to fight off, with great effectiveness, mind you, a 300-pound rapist. Think about that if you have a daughter. A 90-year-old veteran, frail and in a wheelchair, has the ability to hold at bay a band of young thugs. Think about that. It's important that we keep these deterrents in place. The domestic deterrent that keeps our government in check from doing something that would allow it to spiral out of control. The foreign deterrent that would keep any other sovereign nation on the face of the earth that has some sanity from attempting to invade us under any circumstances. And of course, the right to defend yourself. Now, I got it. You don't need to bring a gun to a fist fight. But good God, if the bad guys are packing heat, don't you want to have at least a level playing field? A somewhat level playing field? My friends out there, if you're a gun owner, this is a final call to arms. Alright? I'm not calling for revolution, so don't try to make it sound like that. I'm simply stating this. The new Congress is sworn in and meets for the first time on January 3rd. Right now, it is early morning on the American side of the world, because remember, I'm in Italy. On the American side of the world, it is probably going to be early in the morning when this video gets posted. Maybe midday. That gives us 3 days. 3 full days to muster, to organize. Now, do the Republicans have control of the House still? Yes. Do you really want to hedge your bets on them? And the reason why I'm bringing this up, the new Congress meeting on the 3rd, is the fact of Senator Dianne Feinstein is proposing and introducing on the very first day of the Senate is in session a gun control ban that will make the Clinton ban look like a basic buyback program. Think about that. It's including M1 Garands, probably the most unoffensive and mundane military arm that has ever been used, aside from, say, a Springfield 1903. gun owners, if you're watching this and you have a YouTube channel, make a video. Speak out. Be a voice. And deliver your message effectively and passionately and in terms that are coherent and comprehensible to a non-gun owner who is a moderate, who can be swayed. Because the vehement anti-gunners, you're not going to sway them. Let's face facts. You're not going to sway them. We need the undecided people out there that guns don't really affect them either way. They don't own guns. They've never thought about owning a gun. They probably never will own a gun. And if a gun ban were to be passed tomorrow, it wouldn't affect them because what are they missing out on? They're not even in the community. No offense to them. No offense to them. You need to contact your representatives. There is no opting out. I don't care if you're a hardcore shooter and all you own is the semi-auto SKSs and AR variants and the semi-automatic AK-47 variants. It doesn't matter if you are a college student who only has, just like a little 9mm pistol that you keep in your nightstand at night loaded in case someone tries to break in and rob you, or worse. It doesn't matter if you are a deer hunter and you only bring out your rifle 2 or 3 times a year to make sure it's sighted in accurately and obviously to shoot a deer. We as a gun community collectively need to stand together and present a united front. Otherwise, we are a mountain full of fissures that water can seep into and cause it to erode apart until there's nothing left. Contact your representatives, plain and simple. You need to get involved. No opting out. Not an option. Not this time. Finally, you need to join the NRA. There are 4 million members in the NRA. There are 90 million gun owners. It seems like a hell of a discrepancy to me. The reason you need to join the NRA is because it's the largest, most effective, most efficient lobbying organization. Not only for gun rights, but for general laws that support the principle of individual liberty and freedom. I've already got a video on joining the NRA, so I'm not going to go through all that. Just join. Contact your representatives, join the NRA, present a united front, and gun owners with YouTube channels, make videos. Make a video. It doesn't have to be a high quality video. The image can be crappy. You know what? Just record it, make it an audio file, and then put up a cheesy picture of "Don't tread on me" flags. Alright, there you go. Now you don't have to worry about the imaging problem. Just do something to get the message out in a productive manner. Because as it stands right now, we're about right here. The opposition, regardless of whatever their political affiliation is, because you got to remember, Dianne Feinstein, she's a Democrat. Rudy Giuliani, Michael Bloomberg, they are Republicans, so they say. They're about right here. Alright? You see the discrepancy. The loudest voice in the room usually wins and gets the most attention. We need to start raising hell. Otherwise, we're going to lose this fight, and it's not going to be pretty. And I hate to fall back on the slippery slope argument, but you know what? Great Britain, semi-auto handguns went first, then all handguns, then semi-auto rifles, then repeater shotguns, then lever action rifles. Same thing with Australia. Just think about that for a second. say something. Even if you don't agree with me, say something. Because our system of government requires active involvement and engagement from the citizenry. And I'm done preaching to you guys, all right? I just got off a 12-hour mid-shift, and I've been up for 27 hours now, so I'm gonna go to bed. Remember, united we stand. Divided we will fall.